And now for something completely machinima.
Tracy Harwood. So I've done a little bit of digging around and I've discovered.
Ricky Grove. Fog comes in on little cat feet.
Phil Rice. This is the best film that I've seen all year and maybe ever.
Damien Valentine. Use the machinima, Luke.
Hello and welcome to And Now for Something Completely Machinima, the podcast about machinima, virtual production, and related technologies. I'm your host, Phil Rice, and with me is Tracy Harwood.
Hello.
And Damien Valentine.
Hello.
Ricky is away. No particular reason. He's just had enough of our nonsense. So he'll be back in a future episode. So this episode, we cover the news, and there's quite a bit of happenings to discuss. So, Tracy, why don't you take the lead?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I'll start with a few projects. So I found some really good projects again this month. First off, we have Esoterica, who have released their latest music video. And it's another fab one created in Unreal, revealing even more of that astonishing story world we talked about a few months back. I think it was in episode it's about 30 episodes ago, I think. Anyway, I'll put a link in the show notes.
Esoterica, is that the music video that had like the kind of a cybernetic man suspended in almost like a jungle or something, and all these wires coming out of the head and stuff? Yes. Really evocative looking. Okay.
Exactly. And
very memorable video.
And the young woman with the magic mushrooms.
Right.
So this is actually a bit more of the lead into that part of the story, actually. It's quite interesting. It's called DysUtopia, and brilliant song as well. So definitely check that one out. I also saw, I picked up on this, but I haven't actually sat and watched it. A full 2 hours stage play of Hamilton made in Animal Crossing. Gotta say, it's not really my sort of thing, but it's an interesting use of the game to audio, which has clearly been taken from a stage performance, and that's by GK Animations, and I'll put the link on that. There's quite a lot of comments on there saying, yeah, it's a great idea. I've sat and watched 10 minutes of it. I'm not sure I can watch the whole 2 hours, but we'll see.
Animal Crossing is a very unique game to make machinima with. I think I chose a film way back as a horror sci-fi thing. It's obviously native to Nintendo Switch, which is a portable console. I'll be quite intrigued to have a look at this. I don't know if I want to watch the whole show. I've seen the play of Hamilton. It was very good. I'm interested to see how it translates into Animal Crossing. And I got a friend, I think, who will really appreciate this, so I'll have to send it to her as well. So
brilliant. Yeah, check it out. Let's see what folks think to this one. And then another film that I picked up on is what's described as the final cinematic of No Man's Sky, which has been released by EvilDrPorkChop, because it's actually a machinima made with mod tools created by somebody called Babschool, who very sadly has stage 4 cancer. And the film is actually there to promote a GoFundMe for him. So I'll share the link. Take a look at the film. It's a beautiful film. And if you've got a few shekels to push his way, then I would do that too. So that's that one. And then Phil, you created Chuck Norris versus 50,000 Cavemen, made in Ultimate Epic Battle Simulator 2.
And iClone.
And iClone.
Bookended with some iClone, yeah.
I have to say, I absolutely love your scientific experiments and the way you talk about them. And this one, the lead into the 50,000 Cavemen versus Chuck, brilliant. Absolutely brilliant setup. You've got to make more of these. These are fantastic.
I'll tell you, I was going to tell you between recordings, and I forgot, so I'll tell you now the way that this evolved. So, Ultimate Epic Battle Simulator, and now number 2 is a tool that, or a game that Ricky introduced me to probably 2 years ago. He brought it up. I don't think we've ever reviewed maybe we did review a film made with it, because I think Ricky had picked one, and it was like, 100,000 Santas versus 100,000 penguins or something really absurd like that. And that's when he first called my attention to the tool. So I had picked it up on Steam back then and have had it and just thought, at some point I need to do something with that and see what the possibilities are. So there was a Saturday afternoon that I just went through and just played with it for, a few hours, and ended up recording all this footage of several different scenarios, but one of which was this absurd one where there's this supremely overpowered single Chuck Norris character that, as it plays out in the game, he defeats all 50,000 cavemen.
Yeah.
And walks away as the victor.
Yeah.
And doesn't have a scratch on him,
Indeed.
So I'd recorded all this footage of it, and I did some old-fashioned Machinima camera work where you're live in there and just kind of flying the camera around. I just recorded all of that just in one pass. It took quite some time for the battle to complete. And I think I ended up doing 2 iterations of it, because on the first one I had set the time to pass and it became nighttime, and then it just didn't look as good. So I ran a second one where the time was frozen. But anyway, so I had all this absurd footage, and so then I just thought, okay, I don't want to just release a video that's just Ultimate Epic Battle Simulator and just this. It's not the way I do things. So can I come up with a premise that fits this idea, this crazy idea of, this fantastical 1980s movie, basically, Can I come up with something that at least holds together, for the purposes of the story? And that's how the intro was written. So yeah, and I ended up being more pleased with it than I thought I was going to be. I really thought it was going to be kind of a throwaway thing, but I ended up really liking it. Spent quite a bit of time on the iClone part of it to tune up those performances and stuff. And then there's an ending bit with the tidal wave. That was something that the entire film was already done. Like, it was in DaVinci Resolve, it was edited, it was color corrected, everything was ready, but it was just ending pretty abruptly, of just, him still fighting and the sun going down, and then just my outro logo. And I just thought, nah, what if we could? And I had recorded some footage of right at the tail end of the battle. There's these elements where you can play God with the weather and have these catastrophic events happen. And so I did some of those and caught footage of it. And so I thought, what if, now, can I write an extension to the premise to make that make some sense? So it's really weird how this is not how I normally approach a movie. I'm a big planner. So I chart stuff out ahead of time, and for most productions, there's not a whole lot of improv that late in the game, but this one really, the footage came first, and then it was a matter of what can I do with this? Can I actually construct a story around this that, while silly, still makes some sense? So yeah, I'm pretty happy with it, and the viewers seem to be pretty happy with it too. That it's silly and fun, and
I love.
I'm glad I did it. I don't know how to do other ideas with it. I have done one other film with the battle simulator, but it was a music video one, and it was Zeus on Mount Olympus fighting off this horde of soldiers coming up the mountain, and like this cascade of blood starts spilling down the mountain, and it was just this really wild image. And so I paired it with some kind of, I don't know, Hans Zimmer style epic music and whatever. And that one was not quite as impactful. Maybe because it just doesn't have any comedy in it whatsoever. But anyway, it's a fun tool to play with, and I'd recommend it. It's not really a game per se. It's one of those that's more of a sandbox type thing, and you're mostly just setting up weird scenarios. And there's a pretty active modding community that add different types of, characters that do battle, and you can do some pretty crazy stuff. A lot of intellectual property from known universes represented. I mean, like you saw the Chuck Norris, who in there they call Chunk Norris because he's a little bit
over,
has eaten a little bit more pizza than the real Chuck Norris ever has, I think. And they've got a lot of Lord of the Rings stuff in there, and there's some different anime characters that I didn't even know who they were. So it's a fun tool to play with. It's not really a serious thing, but it's fun. So anyway, that's the story behind that film.
Notwithstanding the game, the bit that made me laugh so much was the scientific experiment leading into it. Your wit and humor just so comes through on that setup. It's brilliant.
Maybe leave that out of the press releases.
Yeah, fantastic.
It was fun to write. It was really fun to perform. That's another one that I used 11 Labs on, by the way, for Dr. Feckles. So that way I got to perform it. Actually, the receptionist has one line too, and that was, again, 11 Labs voice synthesis. I've really fallen in love with that technique because if I were ever going to embark on a long-term project, like a long series or a feature-length work like Damien does, I would do what Damien does, and that is aggregate a cast and get other people involved in stuff, because there's something uniquely gratifying about working with other people in that way. Right now, the phase that I'm in is a lot of one-offs, a lot of we're just going to visit here briefly and then do it. And I'm trying to keep a kind of a crazy pace. I'm releasing a video every week, and I've done so for over 2.5 years now.
Yeah.
It's nuts. So for expediency purposes, this works really well. Or for someone who is just would rather do things as a solo creator. It's a really nice option. And I do not like the outcome of what I would call AI generated voice, like the text to speech. It's horrible. It's very inhuman sounding. This was a way that, I don't know, maybe I'm making excuses here that anti-AI purists would criticize, and fair enough. But for me, a solo performer, it's basically a way to be able to do impressions that my voice isn't capable of. But I still want to control every syllable of every rhythm of delivery. In a longer term project, it makes more sense to actually get an actor involved. And that way, when you get the lines back, I'm sure, Damien, you've experienced this countless times with with Heir to the Empire, that you have some surprise, some pleasant surprise in what they delivered based on your text. There's nothing to be taken away from that. That is whenever you can do that, you should, for sure. Yeah. But this voice synthesis feels like kind of a happy medium for me, for my situation.
I didn't know 11 Labs had that feature, which I'm quite intrigued by, because when I was doing Captain Pelion in Heir to the Empire, to make him sound, initially I didn't have that gravelly voice, but he's an older character, so I sounded too young for him. And I thought, at one point I had a cold, so I read all of his dialogue for the entire book while I had that cold. I don't want to get another cold again just to do his next dialogue, so I could do this. Sure. I could put in my recorded dialogue from before as the result.
For bit parts in particular, I think that would make a lot of sense. For ones with identifiable voices like Han or Luke, I don't know that you could pull it off without some real finagling, and you probably wouldn't want to, right? But for other parts like that who don't have an already defined voice, there's an interesting feature that you can pair with voice synthesis that will let you create a voice clone. So with your cold, Damien, for example.
Yeah.
And now that you've given me this idea, I will probably do this the next time I get a cold, is you record 1 minute of talking, and it will create a voice that then you can use through voice synthesis to make it say anything. And it will honor that timbre. So I've done that for some of the. There's 2 different music videos that I've done that are hip hop, and I used that technique where it was actually a cloned voice that I created and then performed through. Like, it's almost like a mask that you're wearing for the thing. It's fascinating stuff. So, anyway, yeah, that's how that came to be. It was so much fun to make.
It's even better to watch it.
Thank you.
Well, I picked up on another project as well. By the time this episode goes out, we'll know the result of this. But this is The Remarkable Life of Ibelin. I think we've talked about it before. Well, it's made the documentary shortlisting for the 2025 Oscars. It's the story of how a young man with a terrible muscle wasting disease who lived his best life in World of Warcraft where that story was discovered by his parents after he'd passed away. So it's quite a tragic story, but it's also a very uplifting story about the role of a virtual world in somebody's life. I guess.
Have we talked about that film before, or am I thinking of a similar story?
No,
wasn't there a similar story with someone in Second Life where it was a similar thing?
Oh,
maybe not.
Well, it's not a unique story for virtual worlds, that is for sure. I mean, I can remember having conversations about events that were taking place in some of these, metaverse like worlds that celebrated people's lives in different ways. But this one is the first one I think that's got all the way to something like the Oscars. So as we don't know the outcome at this moment in time, I'm certainly wishing that this is the one that wins. And no doubt next time we speak, we'll know the outcome of it.
It must be the first machinima-related film that's ever got to the Oscars.
Indeed it is. Although, Phil, you were saying earlier about a Blender short.
It's actually a feature-length.
Feature-length, is it? Okay.
Feature-length film called Flow, made by the I say company, but it's a very small team, Janus Films, and the lead filmmaker, it's Gintz Zilbadolis, I think. I don't know how to pronounce it. I'm butchering it, but yeah, but it's Latvian group. The film is extraordinary. Like I compare it to, it's something that if it had emerged out of Pixar at Pixar's peak days, when all that whole series of really good early films that they did, this fits right in with that. Like it's wonderful, and yet it's got a strangeness to it that I don't think Pixar was ever daring enough to really incorporate. It's mesmerizing. There's no spoken dialogue in it whatsoever. It follows animals, primarily a cat, but there are some other animals who are major characters, and this adventure, and I won't spoil it because the plot device that's ends up playing a major role in it was kind of a surprise to me, even though I'd seen the trailers, and it was a really intriguing surprise. So that's one worth looking for. It's not, I don't think it's on any streaming networks yet, but it's bound to be soon. Yeah, it's really and it's a neat story. I follow him on X, the filmmaker. He's been posting quite a bit of behind the scenes stuff about how it was made. One tidbit that stuck out to me that I found humorous was all the animal sounds in the film, the birds, the cat, etc. They're authentic. Every single one of them, authentic animal sounds. But there's a capybara who is one of the characters, and they don't make any vocal sounds in real life. So he used the sound of a young camel, like a cross between a bleat and a growl, right? And it fits perfectly. Like it works wonderfully to characterize that character. So anyway, that's one to definitely watch out for, and that one's in the Oscar running in some regard. It's been named.
So this is a unique year then, because two films with machinima, machinima sort of, what would we say, connections
Leanings, yeah.
Leanings, yes, absolutely. In the mix. Fantastic. First year ever. Brilliant. So we'll look forward to reporting on that next month, I think. And then I've got a few tech and product updates for you. Firstly, John Gaeta's Escape.ai platform for emerging artists has now gone to beta early, I believe. And I'll put a link for you to check that out. It's basically positioned as a creator marketplace for emerging forms of entertainment. I don't really know a lot more about it than that, but I'm quite intrigued to see what he's up to because he's always coming up with novel, very interesting ideas.
I feel dumb asking this because I should know it, but remind me where I would know John Gaeta's name from. I know the name. Is he associated with Mass Effect?
No, John is the bullet time man.
Oh, okay.
And actually, a long time, you will know him also, long time connection with Machinima community, where in those very early pioneer days, he went under the pseudonym of Dolt Wisney.
Okay.
But he was Industrial Light and Magic at the time, and he and Kim Libreri won the Oscar for the special effects for creating the Matrix bullet time shot.
Gotcha.
So there you go. He's somebody that we follow.
Yeah.
And vice versa, I think, actually, in fairness. Okay, so that's that one. I saw another and perhaps more fun version of BeamNG's Auto Carnage game that we covered in a film pick, your film pick, Phil, last year, where we were a little executed.
Disturbed. Yeah.
On the morality of the game content, should we say. This one's called At All Costs by Studio Far Out Games. I don't think it's out actually yet, but there is a cracking trailer for it. What I really like about it is the aesthetics of it. It's a little bit like sort of a mash between GTA and TF2. Team Fortress 2 is kind of smashed together. I quite like that look of it. Quite what will come out of it, I don't really know, but I am looking forward to seeing it. It's got great physics in it as well, which is the GTA side of it. Although it's highly destructible environment, like citywide,
is one of the features that they tout for it. There is a demo available on Steam right now, a free demo.
Oh, okay.
So that's probably what I've watched some Let's Play video of the first probably 20-30 minutes of the game.
Right.
Yeah, it's an interesting vibe. Yeah.
Definitely like the look of that. Far more than I do the BeamNG one, I have to say. And then I've got a couple of AI related matters. Firstly, Second Life has launched its AI character designer tool. There's a great video introduction to it, which I'll put a link to. Then Project Odyssey, which is an entity, organization or whatever that's about supporting an AI filmmaking creator community, has announced its season 2 award winners. They had something like 4,500 submissions, something like 190 hours worth of film submitted, and over 30,000 signups for this, which I think is an astonishing achievement.
Wow.
Considering all the kickback everybody's giving AI generated content at the moment. There's a live stream to the award ceremony, which I'll put a link to, and I'll also put a link to the website where you can actually watch the winners and the runners up. Fascinating content. I have to say, not as good as the stuff that I shared a link to last year on the Runway Film Festival, last year's Runway Film Festival, which I think at the moment has also got another film festival running, which we talked about last month, and I think that's still open as we speak at the moment.
Thinking, regardless of how you feel about AI or not, just watching all of those submissions and deciding who wins is a huge undertaking. I remember when we were doing the Machinima Film Festival, and that took a lot of work to review those films. And we'd get 100, maybe 200 at most. And, I was thinking that was a lot of films to watch.
Yeah.
So when you've got that many, yeah.
I don't know. Yeah. There's a hell of a lot of people involved in that. And I have to say, I don't know a single one of the names when you look at that. They're all, it seems to be a European-led project. I'd say 50 or 60 people are named on that website or of that order.
Yeah,
I
that
would
makes a lot more sense. We'd have a team of about 5.
yeah. This is a massive kind of endeavor. It kind of makes me wonder what it's really all about. And there are some questions about the commerciality of what they're doing, but definitely worth, I'm kind of interested in how it unfolds. So I'm kind of following all of these things at the moment just to see what the direction of travel is with this. And this one seems to have certainly hit a sweet spot at the moment. So we'll see where it goes, I think. Then I was also following up this month what Getty has been up to. And it's been commenting basically on the UK's copyright and AI government. This is UK government's copyright and AI consultation process, which actually has now ended just literally a week ago as we're recording. It's arguing what the UK government proposes, which is to add an exception to the law which would enable companies to train on content for free unless rights are proactively reserved. It's basically claiming that is unworkable because it will not recover anything that's already been used in any of them, any of the models, or where content becomes detached from its author downstream. So models using generated content as its own training source, and it's arguing therefore that the processes required to protect IP basically unfairly burden the distributors of creative content, such as the likes of Getty. Now, it's required under the UK government's guidelines to actually make this statement. And it's providing links that people could follow through in order to sort of engage with their local MP. But it kind of, it resonated a little bit because, well, you'll recall, if you watch this, last month I also talked a bit about this as well, where we reflected on the US Copyright Court's decision not to allow copyright on content created by AI, and how I felt at the time that ultimately what that was going to mean is that the likes of Getty will become a kind of a bank for creators. And what's kind of interesting about this current sort of development is that actually that seems to be playing out here, because that does seem to be one of the arguments that these guys are making, that they are indeed going to be overburdened with administration. So they're kicking back on it, clearly. I think it remains a very hot area for discussion, and one I'm sure that will continue to follow, not least because Getty's merger announcement with Shutterstock also highlighted that they were open to enabling creators to promote work on their platform that included not just image, but also music, 3D assets, and what they referred to as other things, whatever they're going to be.
Right.
So, yeah, bit of a mishmash there. But that's it for me this month.
All right. Well, I got some news. Not as much as last month, but got a few interesting things. First off, the BBC Radiophonic Workshop is a very famous part of the BBC that produced lots of sound effects, especially for shows like Doctor Who and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and pretty much anything that the BBC produced, anything sci-fi in particular. Well, their sound archive for Doctor Who and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy have been made available. Now, you do have to pay a subscription to access this content, so I have not done that, so I don't know exactly what's in there. But it's available for composers and sound effects engineers, and to make use of, as long as you pay the fee, which is £149. I think that's for a year. I'm not sure. And I believe you can use those effects however you like. Some of these sound effects are still in use today, like for Doctor Who. The Dalek sound effects, they make this kind of buzzing sound which goes all the way back to the original series. They still use that sound effect now. So these are good sound effects you can use. So that's worth checking out, especially if you're making something along those lines.
Did I understand you right, that Damien, that it's a subscription?
Yeah, believe it's for a year. I haven't actually looked too closely at it because it wasn't something I was planning to do, but I just saw it came up. I thought, well, I'm sure there'll be some people out there who want to access these sound effects. So
it's interesting because I wonder, sometimes I wonder about how licensing works for something that is sold as a subscription instead of a perpetual license.
Yeah.
Back in the day, long time ago, you used to, someone that was in the professional sound mixing, environment, you would purchase a library. Oh gosh, there was one company out of LA that did a lot of them, Hollywood something or other, they called themselves. And you could purchase it. Actually, back then they sold it on CD, but you could purchase this volume, and it came with a license certificate, and then you could use them within certain restrictions. You couldn't resell them and things like that, obviously, but you could use them in productions from that point going forward. And you had that license certificate, so if any issue came up and you were ever questioned about it, you could show, yeah, I have the ownership, I have the license to be able to use these. So on a subscription, what I'm wondering about is if someone subscribes to that library and they implement those sound effects into their production, and then they stop their subscription at the end of the term. So how does the licensing work for that? Because that video might not be released until after the subscription's up, or it might be that it endures long past that, right? I just wonder about that. Like, how does that work? Maybe for sound effects, it could be argued that there's no enforcement mechanism currently like there is for music. Music, YouTube can detect that even as background music on a stream. It can detect commercial music, and it will take care of whatever licensing action is they're set up for on it. With sound effects, I don't think they're doing it that way, but that doesn't mean it won't be possible in the future. So I don't know. I wonder. I guess probably would need to read through the terms to see how they address that, because I'm sure they do. But I've never understood how that works with a subscription product for a licensed piece of audio like that.
All right, so I looked that up as you asked the questions. Thought I better have an answer for you.
Very good.
I'm going to correct myself. It looks like it's a one-time purchase.
Oh, okay.
For that one. So it doesn't look like there's no mention of subscription actually on the website.
Okay, very good.
Selling it. So I think you just pay for it once.
Then let me rephrase the question then. It applies to I know there are some listeners out there who they use either a music or a sound library or a combination of both. There's many companies out there that offer that as a subscription, where you can, as long as you're subscribed there, you can make use of their assets. So now I'm curious about how it works for them. Like if I in 2024 have a subscription to, I can't think of any of the names of them now. That's so stupid. But there's a song and I put it in my video and then I release it, now or late last year or whatever. But I'm not continuing to pay for a license for that. I'm really curious how that works.
I don't remember what it was, but there was one site that was subscription based for content. It might have been 3D models, so not necessarily music or sound effects. And I think they said that as long as you release your product before the subscription expires, then you're free to use it.
Fair enough.
But I can't.
And that's going to be on an honor system, really, in this environment with sound effects anyway. It's going to be an honor system, but at least there's a parameter there that kind of makes sense, I guess. Because otherwise, why continue the subscription? You know what I'm saying? Like, why wouldn't someone just subscribe for a month or a year or whatever the minimum is, download everything they can within the limits, and then cut off the subscription? They have to guard themselves against that somehow. I just don't know how it works.
And the other way around that would be to get the content you want, cancel your subscription, however long it takes you to complete your project, subscribe for the minimum amount, so it could be a month or whatever. Just release your project in that month, and then you're free.
Which to me, that's fair game.
Yeah.
If they're going to let you do that, then that's fair game. Yeah. But I guess the question would be, if it's a library that you could just go download, like why would anyone sustain a long-term subscription to that, unless You just didn't want to bother with downloading and storing all that stuff locally. I guess that would be a reason. But
or they're adding new content constantly.
Or they're adding new content regularly, right? Yeah, that has to be. I would think that has to be part of the draw. Yeah, I'll bet the BBC collection has some gems in there for sure.
Yeah, now I know it's a one-time purchase. I'm tempted.
It's not a bad price for a one-time.
Yeah, and that's
it's a bit steep for an annual, but that's not bad for a one-time.
Yeah.
Depending on what the volume of sounds is, but it sounds pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
Especially if it's sci-fi related a lot, then obviously you'll get some mileage out of that, won't you? Yeah.
It might be fun to put a Dalek sound effect in the Star Wars thing to see if anyone notices it.
Only you.
Yeah. But of course, now I've said it, I can't do it.
No.
Exterminate.
All right, the next thing, Valve have added, let me read this correctly. Valve adds all the Team Fortress 2 client and server game code to its source mod tools, letting modders build completely new games based on the Team Fortress 2 and publish them on Steam.
Oh.
Now, I don't know if this is directly going to affect Machinima or not, but if you want to make a game along those lines, or maybe if you want to make some Machinima using a similar kind of concept as those games, this is probably a way to do that. I'm not a coder. I've not looked at this in any kind of detail, so I don't know how any of that's going to work. But I thought it's interesting and worth mentioning for those of you out there who may want to give it a try. The next one is there's an MMO coming up called Dune Awakening, and it's got a release date, and there's a trailer for it. As I speak, there's the character creator tool has been made. I haven't had a chance to try it out. I think that's part of Steam's Next Fest, so that may disappear before the game is released, which will be after this goes out. I'm not sure yet, because some of those demos still stick around. And the reason I mention this is these types of MMO and survival games are great tools for Machinima, because they've got the open world, and you can get a load of people together to act out the scenes with your characters. The game looks stunning. It's using the same
It's
art
beautiful
style
looking,
as
yes.
as the recent films. So if you're interested in making a Dune or some kind of desert-themed film, maybe this is something to look at. And the release date is in May, so it's not that far off.
Are there worms in it?
Yes, there are sandworms in it, but you can't ride on them yet.
Yeah.
I think they were worried that people would get on a sandworm and just have it navigate and eat everyone else.
Yeah, that's a bit. What's the term that kids use? It's a bit OP.
Yeah.
A bit overpowered to be able to ride the worms. Yeah.
I did read that you can put a thumper down, which is in the Dune universe. It's a device you put in the sand and it summons a worm.
Them. Mm-hmm.
But they're still limiting how useful that's going to be for exactly the same reason that you can't just put one in the base of another player that you don't like and have it a sandworm come and eat the base. Because these structures are persistent in the online environment.
Yeah.
So there are building tools as well. So you can build your base and whatever kind of settlement you want. The ornithopters, which are the flying aircraft in the Dune world, in this trailer they show that someone customizing their own by placing different components. So you're not just customizing the color scheme, you're actually choosing like the cockpit shape and the wing shape and all kinds of other stuff. You get a lot of flexibility with that. So it'd be interesting to see what Machinima creators do with this.
It's a really gorgeous looking game, I gotta say. Like the environments, the architecture, the vehicles, and the characters. It kind of almost feels like the look of it feels like a spiritual successor to like Mass Effect. Yeah. Like it's at that level of cinematic look. Really gorgeous.
Yeah. I'm really tempted to try it, but it's one of those games I'll either not have time for, or I'll make too much time and not get anything else done.
I totally feel you. Yeah, that's the challenge.
And the last one is a film recommendation. It's not strictly Machinima, but it is video game related. And I should have mentioned it last month, but I kind of forgot to add it to our news collection. It's Tetris. Now, this is not a weird way of making a Tetris movie. It's actually a movie about how Tetris, the game, was made. And it kind of goes off into this Jason Bourne kind of spy movie thing that you did not expect. And I'm sure it is exaggerated a bit for this movie, but there is
It's based on real life.
Yeah, it's based on a true story,
real life.
but
Yeah.
it's
I'm sure
exaggerated a bit.
I'm sure they've heightened the drama a little bit, but yeah, it's a pretty intriguing story.
I can't imagine they've actually heightened it all that much, because what's portrayed in there is exactly the sort of thing that used to go on.
Yeah. I don't know how accurate the car chase was, but
Oh, well, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I meant the playing
story.
one group across from another and all being on site at the same time and all that kind. It's brilliant. It's really good.
The overall story is based on what really happened, but they probably added a little more action to it than maybe what really happened.
Sure.
But I'd highly recommend this film because I really enjoyed it. And there are some scenes where they show Tetris, the actual game in progress. So there's a little bit of machinima there because that's real game footage. And there's some moments where, especially in the car chase I just mentioned, it kind of gets this sort of video gamey look. Where or a car crashes, you kind of get that just for a few seconds of they transfer into some more blocky shapes. But yeah, it's really good. It's really it's really well written, extremely well acted, and it's a very interesting story. So it's worth checking out. And it's on Apple TV.
The lead guy, Taron Egerton, is just he's magic, man.
Yeah,
he's really, really magic. This isn't the first film that I've thought that about him, but he's terrific.
There's some other famous British actors who I never would have ever thought I'd hear them talking about Tetris.
They probably never thought so either.
No. But yeah, I highly recommend that film. And that's it for my Machinima news this month.
All right. Well, Liberty City, the environment for GTA 4, the much-loved game, has been ported, or is in the process of being ported, to GTA 5, to the GTA 5 engine. So basically that whole environment of it down to, obviously buildings and roads, but vehicles and the iconic locations. What was the other thing I was going to mention? Vehicles. I'm getting tired. Anyway, it's been ported. It's been ported over. And it's interesting how they did this, because it's a mod, obviously, and they basically created a connection point at the airport. So you basically access this new Liberty City that's in GTA 5 by visiting the airport, which is a location in GTA 5, and it will take you through this little cutscene where you take an airplane over to and land in Liberty City, and then you're there.
That's a really clever idea.
Yes, and it's really well executed. It's been first of all, it enhances some of the beauty that's possible, and then GTA 5 itself is obviously a better looking game than GTA 4 was, but on top of that, with all the shader mods that have been released for GTA 5, some of them very similar to what's been done with Cyberpunk as well, where it's almost photorealistic, the water reflections and the lighting and all of that stuff. So it's pretty neat to see GTA 4, which some not more than a few people herald as was overall a better game from the single player experience anyway than GTA 5 was. Just a more intriguing story with, what was the lead character's name in 4? The Eastern European guy. I can't remember his name now, but I loved that game. It took no effort at all to summon the energy to play through the single player experience in that from beginning to end, because he was just a really interesting story. This kind of a hardened immigrant who's, come to America on this promise and just really wants to make the best of it, but society is what it is, and he's driven in another direction. And it's good stuff. They're Rockstar's has long had a keen ear for. I'm looking forward to GTA 6 for that very reason. I have every faith that they will once again present us with a story that is set well within its time, and also, the social commentary of that whole game series is delightful and biting. A lot of cynical wit, down to the talk radio guy, Laszlo, who has been through all the games. So anyway, that's worth checking out. It is a free mod, and it's being very highly received. So and if you don't want to download and play it, go check out YouTube. There's lots of Let's Plays of it right now, people exploring it. It's pretty neat.
It'd be interesting if they just ported the city itself of New York into, I know it's Liberty City, but if they added more to it, or if it's just exactly as it was in GTA 4. Because I remember when 4 came out, a group of friends I played games with online regularly, one of them lives in New York. So we asked him, is his house in the game? He said, oh, give me half an hour, I'll go and check. And half an hour later he came back and said, no, they left that street out. They wanted to narrow it down just a little bit. So it'd be interesting to know if these modders put more in, or if it's just exactly what was in GTA 4.
I'm not sure about that. I do believe that I saw somewhere that they did activate a lot of interiors.
Right.
Just like GTA 4 had a lot more building interiors you could go into, whereas GTA 5, the base game anyway, a lot of areas that you never really saw the insides of, except for maybe during certain sequences in the single player experience, but then it was locked out for everything else. And a lot of the mods around GTA 5 were around building out interiors for these intriguing looking buildings. And my understanding is that this port does have a lot of building interiors as well. So but as to whether they added more to the city, I'm not sure.
But the interiors are good, especially for Machinima, if you're making something.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're vital, really.
Those movie mod tools that are in, not the mod tools, the movie tools that are in part of the game, it'd be interesting to see what people do in New York or Liberty City.
Yeah, I don't have any reason to think that the Rockstar editor won't work or director mode won't work with the mod, but I suppose that's worth checking on and testing. I'm not sure. John Martin had a really, really interesting post. John Martin is one of the essentially founders of iClone. He's been with them for a very, very long time. He and his brother both have been involved in that space for a long time. And he had a really interesting post that he put on his personal Facebook. He probably posted it elsewhere as well, but that's where I saw it. And basically outlining this process so we've talked some about how these AI models work, and that that you can, for Midjourney and other things like that, there's a concept where you could have your own training database, right? A private one, instead of the one that's controversial is the one that trains on everybody's art without their permission and steals this, that, and the other. But you can tune these engines and run a local version of them where they will actually some of the online versions, I think it's probably a paid subscription. You can actually get the ability to create your own training database, which basically your own images. And the process that he was outlining is with Kling AI, that's Kling. And they basically built essentially an AI training database out of images generated from iClone, using the two, it's Kevin and is it Camila? Is it Camila? Is the female?
I think so.
The main male and female stock characters for iClone, which are very high detail. They look very sharp. And they created these AI training engines with these strategic shots of those characters in iClone, and then could generate these video with that iClone aesthetic. It was really, really fascinating. A fascinating application of that. I'm sure that the big audience for that is for the people who are really into the character creator or the meta-human space, or this whole notion of that. It's a pretty neat experiment, and he detailed a lot of that. So we'll include a link to that where he talks some about how that worked. But basically, the training database wasn't actually images; it was videos, and it was, I want to say that it was 2 or 3 dozen videos of motion with those characters were in there, and then they used that to be able to generate kind of this pure and character consistent result. which I think is interesting. Again, every time we bring up AI, we always give the disclaimer because we acknowledge that there's controversy around it. But I think anyone that's grounded in reality is eventually going to say, okay, eventually that's going to be resolved, and these tools are going to exist, and they're going to have a place in the creative process. And I feel like that this experiment is almost it's like done with that future in mind, of a sense of this is how this tool could be used in a real production environment and be useful. So I don't personally find any practical like when I read through and hear it and stuff, I marvel at the result, but it just doesn't really fit into my process at all. But I think for some people it will, and it might even be that applications like this and like the series that we reviewed earlier this month of the Glurons, that it's cases like that I think are going to help legitimize and, for lack of a better word, clean AI of the seedier part of its reputation, the one that's rooted in this idea of art theft. And okay, now let's hopefully resolve in a proper legal way all of that. And now we're left with these tools that can do these incredible things. And what are some legitimate ways to use them that are not controversial in that way? I think this is one of them. So I like seeing developments like this.
I do like the idea of being able to train your own data and it doesn't use anything else. Because you're only putting in what you've created yourself. Although I don't think I'd find that particularly useful myself either, because if I've got the data, like the motion data, well, I've already done it, so I just put that in my video.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Don't forget though, what generative tools do is generate things that you haven't done. So you can put all this data in it in a collab kind of context where you're containing the material that's in there, and then interrogate it and create stuff that you haven't done. That's the whole purpose of it, really. So within confines that you've defined, right? Yes, exactly. Yeah. No, that's useful, especially for someone who's going to want to continue to produce stuff that maybe isn't well defined yet, Absolutely. But that you want a certain look or a certain aesthetic, or you want a certain character. You think about for a product spokesman, for example, spokesperson. Yeah. To have, I'm sure there's better examples than Jared from Subway because of his history, but you get the idea that So that could be interesting. And there's also some ways that it could probably be used that are going to be kind of creepy, to the Marilyn Monroe version of it, for example, or any other deceased person. Then that's going to raise some different ethical questions, right? So, but I love that the ground is kind of being marked out for some legitimate purposes of these tools. And I don't think today is the day that gets fully realized. But what I liked about this a lot was that I think this process has actually been available for a while, but it has not been particularly accessible. Yeah, it's not been what particularly. It's Google's been technically very, very complicated and much more resource heavy on the user and just plumb hard to do. And this process that he described, even though it's not one that I'm personally reaching for at this point, it feels accessible. It feels like, okay, if I wanted to, I could do that. And I think that's a good thing, So anyway, we'll be keeping an eye on that and see what else becomes of it. The last thing, or second to last thing that I wanted to mention, and Damien, I don't know if you've noticed this. The NVIDIA Omniverse launcher, when you open it now, it says that launcher is going to be deprecated. In other words, go away October 1st, 2025. Yeah, I noticed that pop up a few weeks ago when I was using it. Yeah. Well, here's the thing that's stupid about this is that I've known about iClone to Omniverse since I started using iClone. Right. And I it's one of those things where it's like a slap my forehead moment where, okay,
this week is when I decided to actually dig in and learn how that works. And when I launch Omniverse, does that.
You've missed it.
So, but maybe I'm overreading into it or whatever. It doesn't sound like that the tools themselves are going away necessarily, but the launcher is kind of how we invoke those tools and use them. So do you know anything more about what the ramifications of that are, Damien?
Well, when that message first appeared, there was a link to say that you can learn more. So I clicked on that, and it didn't tell me anything.
Right, that's still the case.
But in the article that you posted there, there's a bit more detail, which I was having a look at just now. And the part that affects us, which is we use, I'm assuming you do as well, Composer to do the...
Right. Yeah. There's an iClone connector that but ultimately you're rendering a USD file and bringing that into the Composer, right?
Right. That is still going to exist.
That's what I thought. Okay.
And the USD Explorer, that's also...
So it'll just become is your understanding it'll probably just become a standalone application at that point instead of being launched through the launcher?
I think it looks like some of the various applications are disappearing, which I'm looking at the list. I've never touched any of these things, so I don't know how useful they are anyway. But then it looks like Composer's still going to exist, which makes me happy. I was a bit worried about that until I read this, because I obviously use that for Heir to the Empire and my other projects I'm working on.
Right.
I didn't want to lose that because
that was the first thing I thought of when I saw that notice. I thought, oh no, because for me it's one thing. It's like, well, I guess I won't do that if it's gone, Yeah. But for you, which your production process has incorporated that, and I think didn't you start using that like part of the way through Heir to the Empire, and that's why you went back and re-rendered some early stuff when in the final remaster? Is that right?
Yeah, so I'm still doing that remaster, but I gained the ability to use it with Chapter 17. I didn't know how to use it, so the only time you see it in Chapter 17 is the space.
I remember us talking about it, that you were interested in it, but you hadn't learned it yet,
Yeah, so it's only the space shots, the ships flying around, because they're fairly simple. I couldn't figure out how to get the characters looking right. So it was actually not until Chapter 18 that I fully switched over to it. And then... Yeah, it's made such a huge difference between especially the very first chapters of Heir to the Empire, which is, I think, using iClone 7, but before they did the character updates. So they're really early versions of the characters.
That's come a long way since then. Yeah.
Because in Chapter 3, there's suddenly the huge jumping quality between the character models, and then again when I switch over to Omniverse. But I want all of those early chapters to look as good as what I'm doing. Of course. Now. So I'm in the process of re-rendering it, about more than a quarter of the way through now, which is good. But when I saw that, I thought, am I even going to finish this in time for October 1st? But it's made me very happy. I don't know why they just don't take out the bits they're not going to use and keep the launcher, because it's a nice, handy application.
Yeah, I found it strange. And my initial reaction to it was kind of not panic, but just a little bit of alarm, because I remember when the launcher first came about and Omniverse first came about, we talked a lot about it on this show, and it was this very exciting sign of NVIDIA kind of setting itself up to be the bridge between all these different platforms. And of course, iClone got in on that early, and we were so happy about that and impressed with that. And then it tied into Blender, and it ties into Unreal Engine. And it's like, wow, this is really neat stuff. And so when I saw that notice, I thought, oh no.
But the stuff that they've knocked out.
Is that going away, or is it just that now they just don't need the launcher to facilitate those connections anymore? I don't quite know.
I would imagine it's that.
I think the latter. Okay.
Yeah, the reason I say that is because the nucleus stuff was all the enterprise stuff that was used for things like the architecture workflow. Not or a workflow that's a different one to an indie creator kind of workflow.
Right. But indie creators could still use it, so
they could. But the nucleus specifically was enterprise level stuff.
It was accessible to everyone in the early days, because I think they wanted people to test it out. And I looked at it, and I could see why it'd be useful for teamwork, but it seemed like such a hassle to set it up. I never really bothered with it.
It was a daunting process. Yeah, I looked at it too.
But that would have been used for things like building development projects.
Mm-hmm.
That's my understanding of how it was positioned.
Yeah,
but we could,
with collaboration being
the key.
Central to it. Yeah.
So my guess would be that actually, whilst they might have discontinued it in this form, it's probably going to be a standalone product suite.
Sure.
That makes sense.
Sort of hived off from the kind of workflow that you guys work on.
Although we could still, like, if Phil and I had wanted to team up to make a film using Omniverse, we would have had to use Nucleus to do it to be able to easily share the assets.
Right.
So that's probably not going to be something we can do in the future.
Right.
But then,
do you reckon?
I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Well, and it remains to be seen too. Like,
well,
I don't know how much for like a small scale collaboration like that. How much more useful would Nucleus really be than he and I just being careful to, okay, here's the USD, I'll put it on Google Drive for you, you take it, you work on it, then send it back. Or, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's not a horrible process. That's still like mind-blowingly cool compared to what was possible 20 years ago, right? So
yeah, but do you think what they're talking about now, and maybe this is the move towards it, is to get rid of the NVIDIA Omniverse wall that's blocked out loads of people using NVIDIA chips? Do you think this is a step towards that?
No, I think it's always going to use RTX.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see them having any incentive to back away from that.
Okay.
Yeah. It would be nice if they would, but I think that's how they justify
the chip
spending money on this stuff at all.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because they're not making any money off of this, but it's really the hardware is where they make their bones.
Yeah.
But I'm glad to know that, because I think it, for people who are, particularly for iClone users, so yeah, certainly the render quality that you can get out of iClone itself has improved over the years, and I hope they'll continue to invest in that area. It doesn't seem to be a priority right now.
It hasn't had any updates for a while, and when they are updates, they don't seem to add a lot.
It doesn't seem like it's a priority, yeah. And so for the people who want more of a polished look to things, I think Omniverse is, if you've got the right hardware, is the easiest overall way to achieve that. The other alternatives are Unreal Engine, which I would rank as second easiest, but still quite difficult. And quite challenging and quite resource intensive, to run the live link thing, man. Yeah. Your PC better have some muscle, it's tough. And then Blender, they have a Blender connector too. Yeah. But Blender has its own challenges in terms of, it's a complex and powerful software and hard to use sometimes. So Omniverse, all in all, you don't really have to learn a new language. It looks
daunting the first time you load it up, but once you figure it out, it's very straightforward.
There's an amazing number of parallels between how you interact with objects in iClone and how you do in Omniverse. And for me, the right now I'm an infant with it. So, but for me, the challenge is that I'm wrestling with right now as the early on challenge is lights don't behave the same.
So I can give you some advice there, which I'll say now.
Yeah, so we'll have to discuss for sure. Yeah, I'm going to continue to play with it, but yeah. You could use some advice?
No, I can share some advice with you right now, which I'll share now because everyone else listening can get it as well.
Great.
When you export your scene from iClone to Omniverse, first thing you should do is just delete all the lights, because what I do is I place my own lights within Omniverse.
Okay.
Because those ones are set for the ray tracing environment. And very rarely do I still use the iClone lights.
Gotcha.
Usually, if it's
so let me ask
animated.
you this.
Right.
Let me ask you this. I've been dying to ask questions like this of you for a while, so we're gonna do this in front of the audience here. But
okay.
And I would ask the same thing of Ben Tuttle if I had him as well, because he does the same similar type of thing with Unreal,
Yeah.
But do you even bother trying to light your sets in a meaningful way in iClone anymore?
If it's something that I need an animated light, like let's say you're on the bridge of a ship and they're in the battle, so you want a red alert light flashing, I'll animate that. Right. But otherwise, I just have lights.
But for mood and atmospherics and stuff, you just basically light it so you can see what you're doing.
Yeah.
And then you delete all those except the one that you want to keep, bring it over to Omniverse, and then you do your lighting there. So you're not actually you're not properly lighting the scene twice.
No.
You're doing kind of lights for, again, just to be able to see what you're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that's comforting because I spend quite a bit of time on my lighting, and just as a test, I took one of the Ralph and Chuck shorts and brought it over, and of course the lights are just freaking insane, like nothing. It's like what?
Yeah, I think
so. But I do like that it brings over cameras. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. That's very nice, and it does keep the depth of field. Another tip I'll give is the depth of field. Keep that very low, like you want it to be almost, you can barely see it in the iClone, because when you bring it over,
because it comes through stronger in Omniverse. Yeah. Okay, that's good to know.
So if you have in iClone, if you have it the way you'd actually want it to look, you're going to be, the background is going to be so blurry, like even the actual character's face, like their nose might be blurry compared to like the actual front of their head. That's how strong it can be. So just set it to be the very basic minimum level.
Very cool. Maybe we'll do you know what, folks, let us know in the comments here. I think we're almost done. Yeah, we're done for today. I'll bring up that Machinima song thing. We'll bring that up next month. See if we can learn some more about it. There's a strange mystery we'll need your help solving. But for now, if you've got any questions or comments, feel free to send us some feedback at talk@completelymachinima.com or leave a comment wherever you've seen, if you're watching this on video. And if you're really interested in more on this Omniverse discussion, let us know. And if there's even a little bit of interest out there, then maybe what Damien and I will do is when I get him together to pick his brain like I've been meaning to about it, we'll do it on a recording and let you all hear as well. If not, we're just going to keep it to ourselves. So let us know if you're interested. So that is our news episode for this month. So on behalf of myself and Tracy and Damien, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.